Hi, welcome to Cubs and Culture for 10/16/2018. Brewers won again last night. I guess I'm sort of rooting for them because I hate the Dodgers so much. Anyway, we're up to All About Eve. It's the 1950 Best Picture winner. It is a very, very good movie. It's a social satire on... It's principally about... ageism in Hollywood, because it's about an unscrupulous younger actress who manipulates using fandom of an older actress to basically supplant her as the main female star on Broadway. And then also there's a lot of satire around Battle of the Sexes, because Eve ends up being outsmarted by this character named Madison DeWitt, who's the theater critic, and then Margot, who's the older actress, ends up getting married, etc. And so it's all about how women are social satire on the pressures of being a woman in terms of aging. Aging, everything like that. The movie is absolutely hysterical. Bette Davis, this is probably her best role. It's a very self-parodied, self-deprecating performance. Anne Baxter is absolutely great as Eve, and then George Sanders plays Addison DeWitt, and those are sort of the characters I'm going to focus on. So let me bring up the clips and everything. See you in a sec. Okay, so one thing I do want to talk about right away as the trailer is playing is you might be tempted to, given how much female presence is in the film, it passes the Birchall test. I think I'm saying that right. Several times. And then also because it's dealing with how the male gaze ends up supplanting how ageism because of the male gaze, ageism, women get supplanted for younger models in both professional and personal circumstances. You might be tempted to read All About Eve as a feminist film or a pseudo-feminist film, and I actually think it's not. I think it's deeply committed to traditional gender roles, and some of the parts of the movie I don't like, sort of subtextual about how sort of the female character with the most agency, Eve, is unscrupulous and manipulative, and then Margot and also at one point sort of mocks Karen for being just a housewife, and she's a very professionally driven woman. In any case, Margot, because she gets supplanted by Eve, ends up just marrying Bill and then becoming a housewife, and then Eve herself ends up getting kowtowed by Addison, basically because he catches her in a lie, and so he blackmails her. And because of that, it feels much more like female agency and independence is sort of like the movie has a problem with that. And again, it's sort of connected to like the screwball comedy, where there's fights for dominance, but at the end the woman must lose, and that aspect of the film is not very pleasant to deal with. But at the same time, this movie is incredibly satirical and biting, and no one really comes out looking good. So even though I think the film is ultimately sort of committed to traditional gender roles, it's incredibly bitter and angry about the situation, and that it came out in the 1950s was probably one of the reasons why, because of the reintegrating of men from the service and everything like that. Anyway, so the first scene I'm going to bring up is going to be a scene involving Eve, and I'm going to spend most of the time talking about that character. Okay, so Eve here, this is probably her big scene, and the thing you have to keep in mind is she's lying through her teeth basically the entire time. And this is the lie that Addison DeWitt catches her in. And a couple of things that I really, really like not only about Anne Baxter's performance, but also about just like the character of Eve. Is it's very obvious, rewatching the film, that this entire story is intended, because at the end she's going after this part, Coral, and footsteps on the ceiling, and she brings it up immediately in the first meeting, because that's ultimately her aim. And rewatching it, there's a great sort of sophistication and to the performance, where it's just a little bit too tonally perfect to be sad. Where actually, upon watching it, you realize it's not Anne Baxter telling a sad story as Eve. It's Eve acting as this poor girl who lost her husband, who didn't exist, etc., etc., etc. And because of that, it's very, very darkly funny, because she's dealing with theater people. Margot's on the right, and then the playwright, and then Karen is that. And they all sort of fall for this hook, line, and sinker. And it's only the woman in the back on your left, Bertie, who's a vaudevillian, who calls her on it. And it really is sort of very, very striking, funny in retrospect, that they all sort of fall for this bullshit act, except for the vaudevillian, which of course is sort of the point, because vaudevillians vaudeville, they traffic in bullshit, so of course they'll recognize it. A con man recognizes a con man. The other thing I like about Eve is she doesn't play. She plays the naive, like Eve the character, not Anne Baxter, but Eve the character plays naivety very, very well. And there's just something about her that is deeply gratifying to see this highly intelligent woman manipulate and being unscrupulous, and getting what she wants in sort of a craven way. This sort of female character, she's not quite a femme fatale, but she's in the same vein as like Vanity Fair or Scarlett O'Hara, and it's all sort of very, very funny in that way. There is, however, in some readings of this film, that she's actually a lesbian, and I think the reason for why people think that is this scene right here, because she plays this infatuation with Margot a little bit sexualized. And again, there's something about this character and about how the film's about gender normativity, where women, heteronormative, where the women have to be submissive, etc., 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 and the men are the head of the household. And so it makes sense that the female villain, who is the most unfeminine in a way, because she's manipulative and she's not submissive. She has a great agency. That of course there's sort of a logical step that she should be a lesbian. In any case, I don't know how exactly I like to feel about that. It's not that strong of an implication. It's mostly in this scene, and then sort of the subtext around her. Again, I think this movie is hysterical. It's kind of problematic, though, in some of its gender politics, because it is from the 1950s. It's very, very good. I also like the director's restrained direction most of the time, and this is sort of a good example of it, because it's you're dealing with the theater, so he has a sort of peer down style of direction, but it has just enough of a cinematic flavor that the movie really moves in. It's kind of really hysterical, the reactions between Bertie, who's like, that's just bullshit, and Margot, who's utterly believe it. Now, Margot, the character, is going to be the next scene, and it's towards the later part of the film, where she's being a queen bee, and she purposely just hit her producer in the head, and at this point she is fed up with everyone because what happened is Eve manipulated her way into being her understudy, and she missed an audition for someone else, and she was just told by Addison DeWitt, who that Eve was gave a great audition, and she's going to fly off the handle here. And this is probably my favorite scene in the entire film. Because it's funny on multiple ways. The first most obvious way is Bette Davis, being an aged star herself, she's totally making fun of herself in this scene, of being the queen bee, of being the diva, and everything like that. And so you have Bette Davis overreacting and being kind of, a great bitch at this point, so there's that. And then you also have, because eventually she starts getting into, then you also have sort of the social satire of Eve and Margot fighting for social for dominance. And if you rewatch the film, you can totally tell that even though Eve is acting offended and everything, she's grateful, because this is something that she's been trying to get Margot to fly off the handle like this the entire film, because then she can then swoop in and take a part. So you have that sort of joke, but then also you have stuff about the creative tensions between writers, directors, and actors and actresses, and as well as producers, and it's all very, very funny, because it's Bette Davis. Like at some point you kind of feel like Bette Davis actually did this on the set of the film. It's totally like a meta thing. There's a meta thing about her being a bitch, being a diva, when in fact she's not, and so it's really a great scene-chewing scene. I also love, and this is a good place for the sort of the crackling of the dialogue, like that line about how she's been playing cat and mouse, and she's like, she's not a mouse, she's a rat, which is a really, really great thing. I also got to say this, I really love his reaction. That's her boyfriend, eventual husband, where the implication of him sitting down and petting the dog is like, I know that you are going to fly off the handle because you do this once in production, so let me just sit down and deal with this. Of course, there's a bunch of in-jokes about Fabian and Belmont, who are playwrights, etc. If you notice, Eve just exited, and that's the other thing I really like about the direction in this film. Even though like in this scene there's a lot of scene chewing, and then obvious stuff, but you also have Eve's motives relatively well hidden. So she just exited the stage because it's mostly about her knowing that she saw enough to know that Margot was going to fly off the handle and upset everyone. I gotta say this, I really like this spat here at the end where I gotta also say this with this line about, not that the last drug show was on the last pill, implying that he's sort of a drug addict, which is just a great zinger. I gotta say that I like this metaphor. I don't know if it's a metaphor, but this argument from the playwright about how, like, it's not you, it's me. And she's like, but I'm the one who makes it entertaining, so no one leaves the theater. I really like that sort of philosophical tension. It's hysterical to me in context and everything like that. Okay, and then the whole thing about the piano being a concerto and everything like that, it's just a really fun, self-deprecating scene, and it's just fun. Okay, so the last character I want to talk about is Addison DeWitt. Addison is a theater critic, and he's the one doing the voiceover narration, and he's played brilliantly by George Sanders, and he's easily my favorite character in the film. I also like, this is the only Oscar, I think this is the only Best Picture movie that indirectly references the Oscars, because Addison just made fun of the Oscars as that film society. His function in this, as the theater critic, he's sort of the tastemaker, and he's sort of the most powerful character in the film, and he ends up doing a couple of things. He helps Eve along by praising her performance and everything like that, but then also he's the character that gives her the comeuppance, gives Eve her comeuppance, because he catches her in a lie, so he blackmails her basically into belonging to him, which is possession in terms of both intimate relationship, I guess, and then also her professional relationship, which he ends up basically shaping. Excuse me. And which is hysterical. Now the thing is, Addison DeWitt is, I think the easiest way of reading him is as gay, because of he stands apart. He's very much a fop, and then also there's that scene in which he kowtows Eve. He ends up saying something along the lines of, "It's improbable that I would be attracted to you, but here we are." In that line, "It's improbable" seems to imply that he's not generally attracted to women. In any case, the character is absolutely a great queer villain, and everything out of his mouth. If you read some of the dialogue about, like, she should not be in a theater. The closest she should be is in East Center, and which is hysterical. There's other lines where he with another actress that he's sort of molding, ends up saying, "You have a point. It's an idiotic point, but you have a point nonetheless," to make fun of her. And there's just something greatly acidic and sardonic in, like, he's detached from the text, and he comments on it, and mocks everyone around it. And he's a great queer villain. And I guess the movie's kind of homophobic in that the two villains, the easiest way of sort of reading them is a lesbian and a queer man, I guess. It doesn't really bother me, because, like, no one in this film is a good person. And so, like, the most submissive, most housewife person, Karen, ends up doing the worst thing. And so, like, it doesn't really bother me. In any case, Addison DeWitt is such a great character that he just stands out, and everything out of his mouth is just golden. Anyway, so that's going to be it for Cubs and Culture. I think I felt this one was a little bit too gushing. It felt a little bit rambling to me. Any case, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a nice night. So I guess go Brewers. Okay, goodbye.